Good evening and welcome to Conversations with Taz. Make sure you get something that's comfy. I've got my fluffy blanket as always. And this evening we are going to get into Black history and what it means to be a womanist Q&A. So I welcome any and all comments, questions, anything. Also, I wanted to remind you that August is National Immunization Month. How ironic. So, if you were one of the ones that were saying that you were not going to get the COVID-19 vaccine because it was not FDA approved, as of Monday, the Pfizer vaccine is FDA approved, so go out there and get it. And if you're somebody like me that's pierced and tatted, none of that is FDA approved, so stop giving excuses. Also, in my link tree, in my bio here, on Instagram, on my Facebook pages, and on TikTok, you will find Taz merch. It's at www.tazisms.com. Do realize you get 25% off with the code women21, no spaces in between there. And that is good through the 26th. And the reason why it ends at midnight on the 26th is because the 26th of August is Women's Equality Day. And if you followed me for any period of time, you know that I'm all about women's equality. One other short little small announcement before we get into the Q&A is next Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Learning Through Black Literature. We will be going over the autobiography of Assata Shakur. You do not have to have this book in order to follow along and participate in the class. And this Saturday, we will be going over part 9 of 400 Souls. And once again, you do not have to have the book in order for me to give you the history behind that. But let's get into it. I do want to start with a few things. And like I said, I will answer any and all questions that anyone has. But let's start with this. I know some may know, some don't know that I am a huge proponent for police reform, especially taking wellness checks away from the police. And over the course of the past couple weeks, a lot of you have reached out to me on several different platforms asking me why I'm so diligent regarding that. Since the police have been militarized, 61% of SWAT team calls have been to Black people and Latinx people, which have resulted in 38% of those arrest warrant deliveries resulting in death. And you also have to realize the history of why the police department and policing within the United States was created. And it was just to catch and return slaves. And that's what they're still doing. Good evening, everyone. Hey, Zach, glad you made it. So that is why I'm so adamant about that. And the percentages regarding police turning wellness checks and traffic stops into deadly situations for marginalized individuals, especially Black individuals, are way too high, and it needs to be taken out. The more you militarize a police department, the more you dehumanize the people that they are supposed to protect. So, yeah, we don't need that, and we don't want that. When you start incorporating military tactics into police training instead of community-based training into police training, you're opening up an entire can of worms that you cannot close. And that's really not what we want to do. But I know you all don't want to hear me on my gigantic soapbox with my fluffy blanket and my ice water for the night. So what questions do you all have regarding me and womanism, as well as Black history and Black culture? And I will do my very best to answer anything. Also, just to be clear, I'm not sure how many people know the difference between feminism and womanism. Feminism is, excuse me, extremely focused on just gaining equity for white women. I know it's supposed to be an all-encompassing movement for the empowerment of women, but it is not. Womanism is looking at the disparities of everyone as a community, as a whole, and attempting to ensure that everyone gains equity while also recognizing that I am a woman and that, yes, women are facing a lot of different intersectionalities depending upon the space that they occupy with someone else. And I could never identify as a feminist because, one, I know that, excuse me, my ancestors that attempted to fight alongside of historically notable feminists were used for their voices and their faces and the power that they garnered in order to propel white women to the forefront. And white women got very much so in their feelings, and they generally do not want to address issues that do not affect them personally. A great case study, if you will, is Nancy Reagan. Nancy Reagan got with Ronald Reagan while he was in a whole nother relationship, marriage, while he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild. She persuaded him to get with her and to pursue more power. And she did not care about anything until it affected her. She did not care about LGBTQIA plus rights until her children came out. Most notably, her daughter came out first as a member of the Alphabet Mafia. She did not care about stem cell research until Mr. Reagan got Alzheimer's. She didn't care about a lot of things until it personally affected her, even though it was affecting other women, even though it was affecting other citizens. And for a period of time, she was the first lady of the United States. But it's been quoted and noted that she referred to herself as a feminist throughout her lifetime. Not very all encompassing, is that? Okay, so let's get to some of these questions. As a white ally on the front lines of African American oppression, what is and is not acceptable coming from us while fighting the good fight? Don't speak over us. Do not, for the life of anything holy or good, try to tone police us. And listen. Listen to us when we explain to you what is a microaggression, what is racism, and what we experience. Because when we are able to share our experiences with you, we want you to be further equipped as an ally, as an accomplice, as a partner, to be able to recognize it when you see it happening with someone else that isn't your close friend. What's the difference between dismantle and abolish? Abolish, you just immediately get rid of. Dismantle is you systematically remove powers from an organization, from an entity, and you place them in the hands that they are to be in. So no one is left in the dark. No one is left unprotected. When you completely abolish, it's like demolishing a building. It happens in an instant. And then you look like, oh, we kind of needed a few rooms in that building. Dismantling allows you to take the rooms from that building and place them within the community where they need to be. Oh, the story of Eartha Kitt. Oh my goodness. We'll have to do a whole nother show on the story of Eartha Kitt. From the fact that this woman died not knowing her actual birth date or her actual age, the fact that she was the product of slave master rape. There's so much to unpack when it comes to Eartha Kitt. Okay, Zach, go charge your phone. My year was my brain the size of a microscopic bacteria. Um, you need to speak to a neurologist about that, boo. Yes, it is important to study on your own. It is also very important to utilize resources provided by the marginalized communities that you want to be an ally and accomplish and or a partner to. Um, I just added a link today that is chock full of information and literature regarding Black history and Black voices in my link tree. Also, I do teach classes. There are other people that I know that teach classes online. My classes happen to be free. Um, if people feel it upon themselves to want to donate to help keep the classes going, that's great. Even if you don't, I'm going to keep them going come hell or high water as long as I plausibly can. But it is important that when educating yourself, begin that journey from the voice of the person or the people that you want to support. If you are saying that you are an ally to the Black community, get your starting point from someone within that community. Because even though people say Google is free, Google is chock full of disinformation, misinformation, and falsehoods, and a lot of racial tropes. So even when people attempt to research on their own, a lot of times people get caught up in missteps because what they think is okay because they Googled it isn't actually okay. Oh yeah, Eartha Kitt and Nancy Rich. Yeah, still will have to be a whole nother show because, first of all, the Reagans are just a shit show. In case you all didn't realize, Nancy and Ronald Reagan became the first GE family. They were in the very first smart home ever created within the United States. I'm not going to say the globe, but I do know definitively it was within the United States. And they had their children who were vocally very uncomfortable about being on camera 24 hours a day, on camera. Um, I guess you could call it reality TV for the time, but it wasn't a show. It was just a series of kind of like live action commercials that they would have to shoot at different times for different shows, and it was all automated. And Nancy Reagan was quite jealous of the melanated magic. Wellerman is a good start, but here's my thing. I always tell people when asked, where should their starting point be? I suggest, honestly, starting with either they had a dream or stamped from the beginning. After you've read either one of those, then step up to 400 Souls, then step up to the autobiographies, because there are a lot of intricacies within the histories of Black people. Excuse me. And I know a lot of people get confused when I say histories, because globally it has been ingrained in so many people that Black people globally are a monolith and that we share one singular history, which we do not. There are multiple histories that make up Black history, because you have Afro Latina history, you have Caribbean history, you have African American history, you have African history, you have Afro Italian history. There are a multitude of histories that, yes, some of them overlap, some of them do not. You kind of have to look at Black history as you do comics, that there are dualities, that there are things kind of like in comics, you have the multiverse. We are not contained to one continent, to one country. So you have things that have occurred simultaneously. And weren't learning one aspect from 1 month and 1 year of Black history is not going to give you a complete picture. You're just going to have a slice of the pie. Okay. Could you explain a little bit more about the intersectionality between Black women and the pursuit for Black liberation? I know you all do not tune in for me to be politically correct. So let me give it to you raw and unfiltered. Without Black women, we wouldn't have the strides that we have right now towards Black liberation and Black equity. Black women have always been on the forefront of every fight. Have we also simultaneously been left out of the conversation in history? Have we also been left at the wayside and overshadowed because there has been a need for society to have a man be the spokesperson or the face of a movement, especially liberation and Black revolution? Yes. Black men will face racism. That's understandable. But at the same token, cisgendered straight Black men are the white women of Black culture and Black society. Black women face a diverse intersectionality depending on the space that they occupy, but more specifically within the space of Black liberation. Because if you're part of the LGBTQIA plus community, as I am, and you're a Black woman, you're discriminated against because of your sexuality, you're discriminated against because of your sex, and you're discriminated against because of your race. And before you go, wait, Taz, if it's within the Black community and you're talking about Black liberation, how are you discriminated against? Colorism. The paper bag test never went away. And if you are not familiar with the paper bag test, you all are familiar with what a paper bag looks like. They would literally take that bag and hold it up against your skin. And if you were darker than that paper bag, you were not let in. And it is extremely prevalent with Black women. Hence the fact that you know the name Rosa Parks, but you may not be very familiar with the name Claudette Colvin. And Claudette Colvin in the Supreme Court case is what actually brought change in Montgomery, Alabama. But you hear about the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycotts. And the bus company was willing to wait it out. They didn't give a damn if Black people ever got back on the bus. So when we talk about the complexion for protection, we're not just talking about yeast yeti yardigans. Because there are people who will look at me and feel like my voice needs to be stifled, or my voice is not important, or my intellect is not as grand as someone else, simply because I got kissed a little bit too much by the sun. I don't care. And if you think I'm over exaggerating, do a small social experiment for the rest of the week. Whatever social media platform you prefer, look at your favorite Black content creators. Look who has to work the hardest and look who doesn't. Look who gets validated the most and look who seeks white validation the most. Because I know the adage is the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice. But baby, we need to change that to the darker the berry, the tougher the skin. Because trust and believe, I don't care where you reside on this globe. The darker, the more melanated you are, the tougher your skin is going to be because the more things are going to be pushed upon you. And within the Black community, I don't know if y'all ready to have this conversation or not, but the darker you are and or the thicker you are, the more you are looked at as the mothering type, the more you are expected to naturally carry the movement of liberation upon your shoulders. Because it took us a while to have some Black bombshells in Hollywood that look like me. Did we have them? Yes. Josephine Baker, amazing, wonderful double agent during the war, created the Rainbow Coalition through the children that she adopted. She had to flee to France in order to do it, but she still did it. Lena Horne. They were accepted because the racial trope is the closer you are to white, the closer you are to right is. Let's see this. People often struggle to see the light between liberation and people that they're fighting alongside, because often we're all individuals who do not like each other or doesn't that hurt them. Yes. Here's my thing. We don't all have to like each other's method. We don't all have to like each other's delivery. Because Malcolm and Martin didn't always agree on each other's delivery. But guess what they didn't do? They didn't take their eye off the prize, and the prize was gaining equity for marginalized individuals, whether it was Black people, whether it was poor people, whether it was uneducated people. Because let's not forget that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and actually we should start calling him the second, because he does have a son that has the same name, but I digress. Why worry about etiquette now? Uh, he also had the poor people's movement, which encompassed everyone. Malcolm X did begin to fight and stand up for and provide aid to lower income everyone, because he realized that a lot of the issues that needed to be tackled were more socioeconomical at the time than race. That does not take away from the amount of race issues that they were. But right now, you have so many people that are allowing platform size and everything else to get in the way and cloud their minds, that they are forgetting humanity, that they are trying to be the head Negro in charge, and forgetting that we are all cogs within the same machine. And as long as the machine is running smoothly, we can push that machine towards producing the product, which is our end goal. And that product is equity. And even though there is me in means, you have to realize there's more than me in means. Okay, I get what you're saying, Deshaun. Yes, people can have disagreements. There were several different disagreements within the Black Panther Party for protection. When Fred Hampton wanted to break off and create the original Rainbow Coalition, before Jesse Jackson and his coontastic ass want to come in and rebrand it, copyright it, and repurpose it for all the wrong reasons. I digress. We'll come back to that later if there's time. There were a lot of people who did not agree with that. There are a lot of people who had disagreements with him linking up and bringing in Asian Americans, white Americans, Latinx Americans, you name it. But they agreed to disagree to move forward. Now you have people that are like, oh, I'm no longer friends with them, so let me tear them down and let me stunt the movement. That is helping no one. What you have to keep in mind is when you have actual activists, when you have actual revolutionaries in your midst, and you decide to be a stumbling block for them, and you think that you're having a gotcha moment with them, you're having a gotcha moment on yourself. You're having a gotcha moment on your brothers. You're having a gotcha moment on your mothers and fathers. You're having a gotcha moment on your children. Because what everybody is out here fighting for also affects you. Also, make sure you get home safe and sound, or you don't. So if you take a disagreement between a friend or a misstep of a friend and decide, oh, I got to tear them down, I got to destroy them, I got to expose them, I got to bring them back down, How's that going to comfort your family when you become the next Tamir Rice, the next Sandra Bland, the next Breonna Taylor, the next Philandro Castro? I'll wait. I'll wait. Because if you thought everybody got along during the times of the Prosser Revolution during slavery, Nat Turner's revolt, when Mother Tubman was leading people to freedom, when Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass were lecturing throughout the continental United States at that time and the UK. If you thought during Jim Crow and the civil rights era that everybody saw everything eye to eye in exactly the same way, I will see you on Saturday starting at 10 a.m. and I will see you Wednesday starting at 6 p.m. Because no, everybody is not going to agree on how to tackle things. Everybody is not going to agree on how to approach things. You didn't see Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa arguing with each other. I mean, they were very problematic, but you get they were so problematic. So problematic. But I digress. Even as much as people attempt to eliminate Claudette Colvin, Anna Murray Douglas, and many other Black women from history, you never heard about them fighting or degrading another person. Because without Anna Murray Douglas, you would not know who Frederick Douglass was. Without her, he would not have had freedom. And even being his first wife, and the only thing he could keep in his pants was barely his legs, most people give all praises to the second wife. Most people know about Rosa Parks, but don't know about Claudette Colvin. But you don't see them going back and forth even during the life of Rosa Parks, because that wasn't the point. The point is the product. The product is equity. And if you are so worried about how you look, being a revolutionary or activist isn't for you. Because you are going to be condemned. You're going to be shit talked about and to. You're going to get death threats. You're going to have platforms burned to the ground. You may lose income. And actually being an activist and or revolutionary is not cheap. It is not cheap to travel. It is not cheap to have supplies for yourself and your fellow men. It's not. And if you are more concerned about your image and protecting a platform and getting butt hurt because you lost a few followers because you had to ruffle some feathers with the truth, this isn't for you. This isn't for you. If you enjoy getting all of your information from tweets, 60-second videos, and memes, this is not for you. This is, this is not for you. Because right now, you have a lot of people regurgitating words that they've heard elsewhere and pretending to be in on the good fight. But if you are searching for white validation and you are backing especially white men that have shown themselves to be racist, problematic, misogynistic, and narcissistic, your internalized racism, your internalized misogyny, or external, depending on your gender identity, is showing. Now, everyone doesn't need to be militant. Everybody does not need to be on the front lines. But everybody does need to play the part that they are qualified for. If you were qualified to hand out supplies, that's what you do. You hand out supplies, because even during the civil rights era, well, I should say the beginning of the civil rights era, because it never actually ended, because we are still in the fight for civil rights. There were people who all they did was open up their homes and provide beds, provide meals, provide transportation. There were people, most notably Black women school teachers, who would use the printing presses to churn out flyers to get people to where they needed to be. There were people, once again, most notably Black women, who were secretaries that would use the phones in the office to make calls when the boss was gone, to make sure that they assembled people. There were Black domestics. Once again, you guessed it, Black women who would, as they're working, cleaning, cooking, and raising children for white families, try to get through to white women, white wives, white daughters, white sisters, white mothers, because they realize who set the tempo on the White House, who set the tempo for the legacy and the ancestry of racism. Now imagine the courage that it took to try to educate people who truly felt that they were better than you during a time where it was legal for them to just kill you, and you were in their home and they could have said anything to end your life, get you lynched, get you arrested, anything. And these women were the originators of how a lot of mothers and grandmothers and older aunties now talk to Black women within the community, going, oh, don't ever tell a man exactly what you want. You make it seem like it's his idea. Ever wonder where that came from? That's where it came from. These Black domestics in the home, making white women feel as if not perpetuating racism in their home was their idea. That white women finally joining in the fight for equity, like truly joining into the fight, was their idea. And some people will be like, well, wait a minute. Throughout history, there was this woman, there was that woman. That no, they were not fighting for overall equity. They were not truly fighting for the abolishment of slavery. They were not truly fighting for equity across the board. They were fighting for their rights. They just attached themselves to certain movements and then slowly but surely flipped those movements over to a white face so that they would be able to vote, so they would be able to buy a house on their own, so they could finally open up a checking and savings account or get a credit card or work. Because it was okay for Black women to work. And even during the times of slavery, are you aware that there was a tax on the head of Black women from the age of 16 throughout adulthood, which made it virtually impossible financially for free Black men to marry free Black women because they couldn't afford to live on meager wages and pay the tax so that their wives would not be thrown back into or thrown into slavery? Because the tax was actually supposed to go for every adult male. But funny how they left Black men out of it, huh? And who decided that Black women were adults at the age of 16. I'd be interested in knowing that as well. But when you underestimate and over sexualize a certain group of people, that's what you get. And during the same time, it was drilled into the minds of men, women, and children around the globe that white women were the picture of fragility, black women were the picture of masculinity, while white men were hypersexualizing black women as early childhood because of how we naturally develop. White women were getting increasingly jealous, and that's why you had laws and mandates where we had to cover our hair, where we were muzzled, where we were taken on display like a circus animal to go around the globe and go, ooh, look at this big booty. Ooh, look at these breasts. Ooh, look at this. This is why we and indigenous men and women were put into zoos. Ever wonder why white women, especially, are very comfortable walking up and touching a person of color's hair, petting a person of color on the head? Because historically and traditionally, we were pets, servants, dinner. Yes, you heard what I said. Furniture, filler for cushions, crocodile bait, deadly entertainment. Ever wonder why you have Egyptian exhibits, Nigerian exhibits, Algerian exhibits, but the only exhibits from predominantly and traditionally and historically Anglo-Saxon countries or more of modern recent history? Where do you think that they got those jewels from that they now want to tour around? Who wants to flock to the tour of the UK in a museum? Because what are you going to get? What are you going to see? The invention of writing? Oh, no, that's Egypt. The invention of paper? No, that's papyrus. That's Egypt. Oh, the invention of inoculation? Oh, no. No, no, no. That's not them either. The art of being multilingual. Oh, no. Nope, because they didn't do that either. Because white people didn't learn any other language. They taught English to all of us so that we could translate. So, on any global museum tour, is there a great tour of Switzerland? Oh, no. Um, Colonizers were so intent upon stealing the magic. This is why we say it's melanated magic, black girl magic of black people, that even after making cookbooks, you heard me, during the times of enslavement, during the 1910s and the 1920s, as they first started to discover the burial grounds and sacred graveyards, because that's what they are. Stop just dehumanizing them and going, oh, they found the pyramids. Sacred burial grounds and graveyards, because these were grave robbers. This is why they would have mummy parties, where they would grind up parts of the mummy and consume them. Let that sink in. But black and brown people are the savages. Colonizers would have been wiped out by winters if it was not for indigenous people and for black people. They would not have had profitable, resilient crops if it wasn't for black people. Because the first tobacco crop here, I know they accredit that to John Rolfe, but it wasn't. It's a black woman by the name of Indigo. Go-Go, if you will. And people were shocked that she lived well into her late 90s and had many generations. And they were so pissed off at the many generations she was able to produce and procreate that great grands were starting to be kidnapped and sold off. And I know that there's a great tradition within the United States of racists going, well, if you don't like it, just leave. Just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Just do this. We did multiple times. Rosewood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the MOVE movement. Each time we have been raided, lynched, set on fire, bombed, torched, ran out of town. And if that doesn't happen, then there is a unsettling narrative that's put out about us that we jack up the prices and we just want to take advantage of everyone. And that we can't create anything of our own. But I am still waiting for someone to name one original invention or innovation from an Anglo-Saxon person. And I mean, it has to be 100% theirs. No parts came from someone else. They didn't steal a patent from someone else. Einstein, Edison. And don't say the light bulb and go, well, it was just the filament that came from. No. Learn about the Edison 8. There were 8 black men that actually came up with the inventions that he slapped his name on. Colonizing something and remixing it like your P. Diddy from the late 90s is not creativity. You can't reinvent the wheel after it's already there. Vaccinations even came from Onesimus within the United States, and Onesimus was a slave that was gifted to the Honorable Presbyterian minister Cotton Mather, who was the product of some very twisted incest. But I digress. Everybody in the United States at that time, during the colonial times, felt that his family was kissed and blessed by God because one of his grandfathers survived a mini hurricane off the coast coming into the country. And Cotton asked Onesimus if he had ever had a certain disease, and he said, well, yes and no. This is what happened. We were injected with this. We were monitored. I'll give you 2 guesses who Cotton turned that information over to. Because it's that person that you're taught about in the history books, not who actually came up with it. Just like there are a lot of great white explorers that you were taught actually circled the globe and had all of these adventures. You do realize that pre-colonization within the United States and pre-enslavement within the United States, the greatest explorers were black women and Latinx men. Yes, they were traveling together because black women would dress up like men and get on the freaking ships, something that you weren't told. Also, a lot of black royalty was traveling and writing travel books, which at that time served kind of as an at-home correspondence type history book / geography book. And you had racists taking these books disseminating them and rewriting them into smaller pamphlets or putting them into miniature plays. This is why theater predated literature, because for the longest amount of time, 97.6% of the Anglo-Saxon population was illiterate. So they were using word of mouth to spew their hate. And the small handful of people that could read, if they read anything that was authored by a Black person, didn't depict Black people or Indigenous people as sex mongering savages, they would just tell you that the book said what it said. And yes, I am that weird nerd that has gone back and read all of this shit. Oh, Lord. DMAC, what invention do you have that is solely Anglo-Saxon? I'll wait. And if you messing with me, I'm calling your mama. But a lot of people don't, you're not taught these things. You were taught to believe that the only history of Black people is slavery. That Black people sold Black people to Black people, when actually it started off with the Portuguese, because you had a wayward son that was like, Daddy, please love me more than anybody else. I can increase your riches if we just go take these Black folk and sell them to other people. And then they started paying off mercenaries to go and abduct people. But you're not taught about that. Lord have mercy. Cousin, I can't take you right now. Clout chasing and stealing. That's called colonization. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 2021. We're not supposed to call them colonizers anymore. They are now gentrifiers. They gentrify everything. Lord have mercy. But a lot of people don't realize that. Just like the greatest myth ever is that white people introduced Christianity to Black people. If that's the case, please explain to me how the Church of Ethiopia has existed since 38 AD, 38 BC. I'm sorry, and is still the one church on the planet that governs itself. It has no governing body. There were people even before 1619, when the first 20 enslaved Black people were brought over between two different ships that were hijacked from going other places. Let's be clear. Colonizers were hijacking ships to bring people over here, but their cover story is that we were selling each other to each other. There were people who were baptized in the name of Christ before getting on the ship. This is why I tell people Christianity within the United States is a beast all of its own. It has been bastardized so much. It is a beast all of its own. The translations are wrong. It's being weaponized. And most people within the United States that claim to be Christians don't even read the religious text for themselves. And here's a little bonus nugget. The Church of Ethiopia has survived many attempts to be overthrown, overtaken, and overrun. And not once did they need 100 years war. Not once did they need the Knights of the Templar. Not once did they need to rape and pillage in the name of God. I'm just saying. But you have to realize there are so many narratives. And when people say, oh, this came with science, there was a whole era of purposefully pseudoscience being put out, that you had racists legitimately knowing that they were lying to the masses, but calling it science, calling it religion, calling it morality. Because how moral of a people can you be to say that, oh, you know what? England won't let me practice the religion that I want to. They are oppressing me. Let me come over to this country, kill off the indigenous people of this country, attempt to enslave them first. That doesn't work because they will not work the schedules that we want or need them to work, and they are not physically equipped to do that. So let's go steal these black people, bring them over, oppress them, create a racial hierarchy. And then when we can no longer overtly oppress people, we'll just call them lazy. And stop believing that Jim Crow only occurred in the southern states of the United States. No, there was Northern Jim Crow and Southern Jim Crow. Northern Jim Crow, just like to this day, just how Northern racism is more subtle. Racists in the North figured out one thing: they could use the laws within the Constitution, federal law, and state level laws to ensure their racism. Where do you see the most private clubs and most private establishments? In the North, because they can exclude black and brown people. When you look at wage gap disparages and everything else, where do you see that more? Oh, the North will tell you, come on up here. We'll pay you a good wage. We'll have you do X, Y, and Z. But where do you think most of the slave labor, I'm sorry, prison labor was originally going to? Yes, the prisons that were leasing out prisoners were in the South, but most of the work was taking place in the North. And that's why white workers started to unionize and white workers started to revolt. They didn't give a damn about black people. They just wanted to be paid money, and they were being let go because, free labor or close to free labor was one thing, because prison leasing just meant that you're supposed to provide food, clothing, and shelter. That was your payment. So that they could keep housing more black people within the confines of the walls. How well do you think that they fed, sheltered, or clothed these individuals? And the northern unions, how many black people do you think were in there? How many Asian people do you think were in there? How many Latinx people do you think were in there? You don't even need one hand to count. You don't need one hand to count. Now, let me leave you with this. The foundation of capitalism within the globe was enslavement. There is no place on this planet that has its basis in capitalism that also did not have its origins of it from enslavement. Enslavement began to become unpopular when successful revolts began to happen. Why do you think to this day Haiti is still vilified? Because that fear started there. You have a country under black rule because they said enough and fought back and fought for their independence and gained it. And after that revolution, you had the Prossers, a husband and wife, that started a revolt. You had Nat Turner and so many more. And these were not small revolts. It's just like the Harper's Ferry revolt. It got to the point where even poor white individuals started to see the disparities, and they couldn't take it anymore. And before you spew off, about Uncle Tom's Cabin and Harriet Beecher Stowe. She took the stories that were written to her in letters from her sister and put it into a book to capitalize off of the trauma of Black people. But outside of capitalizing upon it, what more did she do? Stop giving people praises that they do not deserve, that they have not earned. And there is one particular scene that is written out in Uncle Tom's Cabin that was legitimately and literally verbatim ripped from the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. Oh, yes, D-Mac, they definitely invented trauma. Definitively, with all the Anglo audacity, invented trauma. They cooked it in a pot and served it in some crispity, crackly, cracked up pots, bowls. So, yeah. But that concludes tonight's show. I will see you all again on Friday. As always, on Fridays, we do free form, no particular topic, and you never know who's going to be here with me. But thank you once again for joining. Make sure you check out the resources in my bio. And don't forget, with the code women21 for tazism.com, you get 25% off until tomorrow, which is Women's Equality Day. And as always, each one reach one, each one teach one. Till Friday. Thank you for joining me.